Hello everyone, it's Ben at TV Parts today, and I would like to be your DIY TV repair guide. In today's video, we are going to be covering some simple troubleshooting tips that we would suggest taking before we get to the repair process. So, when it comes to DIY TV repair, the most important thing to keep in mind is the process of elimination. Without expensive diagnostic equipment, without practical knowledge of component level repair, without there being specific knowledge of how to read correct voltages, we are going to be relying on symptom mapping and the process of elimination. And we can do this with a couple different steps for each issue. So to get started, let's look at the power supply board in your set. The power supply is going to take the raw voltage from the wall and it's going to transform that into a voltage that is usable by the various components in your TV. So if we are seeing a complete loss of power to the set, if we are only getting partial power, or we're seeing a TV set that is slowly draining power, we can look at the power supply board first as the most likely culprit in this issue. It is important to keep in mind that a lot of issues will overlap in a TV. So for example, we could say that if there is a short in the backlight strips, that could be preventing your television from turning on if you have a failsafe on the power board. So we want to use that process of elimination. We want to try replacing the power board first, and then if we're still having the same issue, then we can start looking at the other parts in the TV to try and replace to rectify that problem. It is important to keep in mind, if we do replace a part and those problems do persist, then we need to start looking at the other components in the TV that could be the issue there. Next, we will be covering issues that are commonly attributed to the main board in your unit. The main board kind of acts as the brain of the television. It's going to control functionality when it comes to what's being displayed on the screen as well as what sound is being produced. It's also going to have the basic settings as well as any user settings, things like the contrast levels, backlight brightness, or any saved login data for your apps. This board, almost in every situation, is also going to have the HDMI ports, the coax connection, optical audio input, as well as any component inputs for secondary devices. So if we're having issues with any of these connecting ports, we can look at the main board as the most likely culprit. It is going to be important to troubleshoot any secondary devices as well as connecting wires first. We don't want to swap out the main board just to find out that we had a bad HDMI cable or a video game system that was not functioning properly. We're going to want to go through the process of checking those secondary devices as well as checking any connecting wires just to rule those things out first. There are some other issues with the main board that could be affecting functionality of your television. If you are getting sound coming from your TV, but you're not seeing an image displayed on the screen, we can do what's called the flashlight test to determine whether the main board is generating the image correctly or if the backlights are not firing correctly. We do have that flashlight test video in a link down below in the description, just so you guys can see what that looks like. Another issue that we can have is actually the inverse of that. If we are seeing an image on the TV screen, but we are not having any sound come out of the television, this is also very commonly attributed to the main board. We would want to first go ahead and troubleshoot any secondary sound devices like a sound bar that we have connected to the TV, as well as going into the TV settings just to make sure that everything is set up correctly for the TV to be either giving that sound to the sound bar or generating that sound directly from the television. Finally, for the main board, we wanted to cover what we call artifacts. Artifacts are any sort of distortion or unusual shapes on your television screen. And this could be anything from ghosting, where we see almost multiple images laid over each other, just very askew, to multiple thick lines that are jumping around on the TV screen. These are all things that are very commonly attributed to the main board, so we would want to try the main board first in these situations. The last board that we are going to cover today is the TCON board, or the timing controller board. This board has the very complicated task of working with the main board to display the images on the screen in the correct order, effectively telling which pixel to fire in which color and at what time, even down to the intensity of each pixel, so that we see a nice, clear picture on our TV screen. One of the most common issues with a TCON board is seeing a single pixel width line that's stationary that runs from top to bottom on your TV screen. It is important to note if you are seeing horizontal lines that's running left to right on your television screen, this is almost always a problem with the panel and not with the TCON board. It also is important to note the width of this vertical line. If it is a thin, stationary line, this is usually tied back to the TCON board. If we are seeing very thick lines that are jumping around on the TV screen, then we usually attribute those with the main board. And of course, there are other issues that can be tied back to the TCON board, namely a discolored or distorted picture. But we have to remember that the TCON board and the main board are working very closely to generate this image on your screen. So a problem that looks like it could be from a TCON board could very easily be from the main board. This is why we stress this process of elimination so heavily. We want to try the most common part first, and then we want to work our way down the line in that order. So, in conclusion, when trying to diagnose the issues in our television, it is important to remember the process of elimination. We cannot stress how important it is to try the most common cause of an issue, and if that swap doesn't work, then trying the next most common cause. I would also like to mention that with some OLED and QLED TVs, these processes can change. I know that the intricacies of TV repair can seem overwhelming at first, but feel free to use TV parts today as often as you need to answer questions or get you pointed in the right direction. We have a very capable and knowledgeable staff who is ready to answer your emails, ready to answer your phone calls with your specific questions about your specific television. All TVs are subtly different. You might not have a dedicated TCON board in your unit. You might not even have a dedicated power supply in your unit. So please let TV Parts Today help you with the heavy lifting when it comes to diagnosis and troubleshooting. We really are here every step of the way to help you in your DIY TV repair adventure. That phone number is 930-212-1975. And that email address is info@tvpartstoday.com. That's info@tvpartstoday.com. And we will see you next time.